Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time for another top 10 kind of video. Although in this instance, you could probably class it as a worst 10 or lowest 10 or something like that, because it's all about negative results. In light of England's recent game against Iceland in the UEFA Nations League, which England went on to win, albeit only just, the coverage on the BBC seemed to dwell on the last time the Three Lions played the tiny Scandinavian nation, which of course was the infamous Euro 2016 second round match, which Iceland went on to win 2-1. With this in mind, I decided to take a look back at England's entire international history and pick out the 10 results which I think are the most embarrassing in the history of English football, dating all the way back to their first international match in 1872, some 158 years ago. I'm not including the games against the magical Magyars of Hungary during the 1950s, as I think they deserve an entire video dedicated to themselves alone. So those results are completely disregarded, but apart from those, here are England's 10 most embarrassing results of all time. Number 1. England 0, USA 1 at the 1950 World Cup. England entered their first World Cup in 1950 brimming with confidence, fully convinced that they were the bona fide favourites for the tournament, and with good reason too, boasting the likes of Stanley Matthews, Tom Finney and Stan Mortensen, amongst a plethora of other talents. They won their first group game 2-0 against Chile, but after this, they faced the rank amateurs of the USA, in a game which everyone expected would be an absolute walkover for the English. The American side, which consisted partly of Scottish amateurs who had been imported to the side in order to play for them, had lost their previous 7 games by a combined aggregate score of 45-2, so a bloodbath was to be expected. Matthews, however, was left out of the side, so arrogant were the England selectors that they didn't even think that they needed him for this game, so they could rest him for the vital game against Spain. True to sporting hubris, Haitian Joe Gaetjens, who was working as a dishwasher at the time, scored the winning goal, and Frank Borghi, a goalkeeper whose primary sport was actually baseball, had the game of his life, repelling all that England could muster at him. England just couldn't find the breakthrough to open the floodgates, even hitting the woodwork up to 11 times during the game, and the USA held on for its most famous victory in football. The press, bewildered from the score filtering through from Brazil, believed it to be a misprint, as they thought the score was actually 10-1 and that a 1 had been missing from the England scoreboard.
It obviously wasn't.
But it is telling too that the next time England played the USA, they won 8-1. Number 2. Scotland 7, England 2 in 1878. Nowadays, England versus Scotland almost seems like a foregone conclusion, but believe it or not, in the early days of international football, when it consisted mostly of British teams playing each other, Scotland and their passing approach were the team who dominated the scene, and England, with their more physical and robust approach, couldn't catch up. As a result of this, they often fell at the hands of the Scottish, but none more so than the emphatic 7-2 defeats which they suffered back in 1878. Scotland bamboozled the English defence, presumably, and found themselves 6-0 up by the 51st minute. And although England did pull 2 goals back, Scotland still found the time to muster a 7th goal before the game was out. It is telling too that 6 of the England players who played in that match, including 4 debutants, never played for their country again. Number 3. England 0, Algeria 0 in the 2010 World Cup. Quite simply put, this is the most turgid England performance that I have personally ever seen. I remember watching it with a friend whilst playing Ashes cricket at the same time, and not once during the entire game did I ever think it necessary to watch the match, as it was so tedious and dull that virtual life was more appealing than real life. England were, undoubtedly, an insipid team at the 2010 World Cup, going on to be thrashed by Germany 4-1 in the round of 16, who must have been licking their lips at the prospect of facing a team who barely laid a glove on Algeria, the minnows of the tournament. It reached a point in the game where the camera cut away from the pitch to a bird nesting on the Algerian crossbar to provide the viewers with some form of entertainment, and on the Guardian's live feed of the game, the writer simply updated his followers with the following in the 83rd minute. Quote, "Johnson and Lampard combined down the right hand side. Not very well, they just combine." Close quote. At the final whistle, the fans booed the team, to which Wayne Rooney angrily responded, quote, "Nice to hear the fans booing you, that's what they call support." Close quote. To be fair, when you have Emil Heskey up front, things are only going to end badly. Number 4. Norway 2, England 1 in 1981. During a year in which England won just 2 out of a possible 9 games, this result topped the whole lot, although it has been made more iconic for more than just the match itself. The game itself was in qualification for the 1982 World Cup, which England ultimately just about qualified for, with Norway finishing bottom of the group, but it didn't stop the Norwegians from causing an upset. England took the lead within 15 minutes through Brian Robson, but 2 Norway goals in the space of 5 minutes just before the first half was over proved too much for England to overcome. At the final whistle, the Norwegian commentator Bjørge Jellelian shouted the following, unable to contain his emotions. Quote, We are the best in the world. We are the best in the world. We have beaten England 2-1 at football. Lord Nelson, Lord Beaverbrook, Sir Winston Churchill, Sir Anthony Eden, Clement Attlee, Henry Cooper, Lady Diana. We have beaten them all. Maggie Thatcher, can you hear me? We have knocked England out of the Football World Cup. Your boys took a hell of a beating. Your boys took a hell of a beating. You don't catch Martin Tyler doing that, do you? Number 5. England 2, Scotland 3 in 1967. 9 months earlier, England had been crowned world champions on their own turf after they beat West Germany 4-2 after extra time. But Scotland, always eager to put one over on the eternal enemy, flipped form on its head completely. England expected to triumph, but were on the wrong end of some cruel misfortune, as 3 players, namely Jack Charlton, Ray Wilson and Jimmy Greaves, all suffered injuries which made them less effective during the game. Bear in mind, no subs were allowed at this point. Dennis Law put the visitors ahead after 28 minutes, but no more goals would arrive until the 78th minute, before a 4-goal spree in the final 12 minutes decided the contest. Scotland struck first with Bobby Lennox before England responded through Geoff Hurst, although Jim McCalliog seemingly put the game to bed a couple minutes later. Although after McCalliog's goal, just a minute later, the stricken Charlton got one back for England, but it would prove to be too little, too late. England's 19-game unbeaten run was over, and the Scottish press claimed themselves to be the world champions, since, of course, they had beaten the incumbents. Number 6. England 2, Croatia 3 in 2007. During the ill-fated Euro 2008 qualification process, England had already lost to Croatia after an inexplicable bobble deceived Paul Robinson for an infamous goal. But as it transpired, all England needed to do was draw with the Croatians, and they would go through to Euro 2008, knocking the Croatians out in the process. However, things didn't start off promisingly, as not only did Steve McClaren field the inexperienced Scott Carson in goal for his debut at the international stage, but the man who sung the Croatian national anthem accidentally sung, instead of "Dear, we love your mountains," quote, "Dear, we love your penis," or something to that effect, and I have verified this with someone who I live with who is Croatian. Carson went on to do a Rob Green before Rob Green and led in a tame long-range effort from Nico Cranshaw before Ivica Olic evaded the offside trap and rounded Carson for 2-0 within 14 minutes. A Frank Lampard penalty and a Peter Crouch volley restored parity, but Mladen Petric's 30-yard strike, which Carson probably could have done better with, proved the killer blow, and England were out. However, the enduring image from that game is Steve McClaren with an umbrella, who the press subsequently dubbed the Wally with the Brolly. He was sacked the next day. Number 7. England 1, Iceland 2 at Euro 2016. The game which inspired this list, I could not leave it out of this 10, which, it must be added, is in no particular order. Whilst the game against Algeria was England's dullest game that I've ever seen, this one somehow managed to be worse. Get me that. Commentators compared the Icelandic side to a championship side, their assistant manager was a part-time dentist, and it was their first major tournament, becoming the smallest nation to qualify for the Euros with a population only just lower than Coventry. Despite a very shaky group stage, England were the marginal favourites going into the game and took the lead after 4 minutes through a Wayne Rooney penalty, and surely they could relax. But from then on, England's world caved in. A long throw proved their undoing merely 2 minutes after Rooney's penalty, as Ragnar Sigurdsson lost his marker to tap in from close range, before Kolbeinn Sigurdsson hit a tame shot which Hart fumbled in, and from then on, his career would peter out dramatically. England tried undesperately to salvage the game, only mustering 2 shots on target in the second half as Iceland defended brilliantly, and they relied on an 18-year-old Marcus Rashford who came on in the 85th minute to try and save the game, although it is worth noting that he was, by a considerable distance, their best player on the night. Iceland held on, the press was in uproar, and Roy Hodgson, shocked and embarrassed, resigned within 20 minutes of the final whistle. Number 8. England 1, Poland 1 in 1973. The match which tarnished a legacy. During Sir Ralph Ramsey's reign as England boss, they had won the 1966 World Cup and put up a decent showing too in 1970, only to lose to West Germany after extra time in the quarter-finals, but the knives were out for him by the time 1973 came around. His ideas were perceived to be outdated and old-fashioned, and the fans wanted a new manager in to refresh the squad. But some salvation could arise if they beat Poland in front of a packed 100,000 crowd at Wembley to qualify for the 1974 World Cup. Anything else, and they would be out. The Poles' goalkeeper, Jan Tomaszewski, was described by Brian Clough as a circus clown in gloves, but he went on to have the game of his life, despite being injured in the first few minutes of the match. England peppered Poland's goal, with 36 shots compared to Poland's 2, but in the 55th minute, the Poles broke off on the counter, and Jan Domarski hit a shot which squirmed under Peter Shilton and found the net. England had a goal disallowed for a foul before being awarded a penalty, which Martin Peters later admitted to diving for, which Alan Clark subsequently converted, but after this, Poland put up stubborn resistance. 4 efforts were cleared off the line, 26 corners proved fruitless, and the woodwork was hit twice too, but the route through wasn't coming and Poland hung on to qualify. The silence post-game was deafening, and within 6 months, Ramsey was gone. Number 9. England 2, Romania 3 at Euro 2000. In a group containing Germany and Portugal as well, England couldn't afford any slip-ups if they wanted to escape the group stages, but a defeat to Portugal dented their aspirations. An uninspired Germany were put to the sword, so all England needed to do was draw with Romania and a place in the last 8 would be theirs. However, they started poorly, as Christian Kivu's cross-turn shot deceived everyone to go into the back of the net, and it could so easily have been more too, as the Eastern Europeans dominated the first half. However, goals from Alan Shearer and Michael Owen turned it around within the space of 5 minutes at the end of the half, although Romania would equalise in the 48th minute. England's misery was subsequently compounded after Phil Neville clattered into Viola Moldovan in the box, and substitute Iono Guanea converted the penalty to put the nail in the coffin. And I apologise for the pronunciation butchering, I'm sure, of those two players. If you told a person who didn't know about Euro 2000 that a group containing Germany, Portugal, England and Romania would see Romania and Portugal progress, you'd be laughed out the door, but that is exactly what transpired. It wasn't too dissimilar to England's 2014 World Cup group, where Costa Rica and Uruguay went through at the expense of the Three Lions and Italy. Clearly, they hadn't learnt their lesson. Number 10. Sweden 2, England 1 at Euro 1992. Admittedly, this wasn't overly shocking in terms of the result, as Sweden were a good team filled with talent such as Thomas Brolin and Anders Limpar, but it's more the manner of the defeat and how the manager, Graham Taylor, somewhat lost his head. Needing a win to go through from the group stages, David Platt scored for the 1990 World Cup semi-finalists after just 4 minutes, but Jan Eriksson took England aback by scoring in the 48th minute. Graham Taylor's master plan, however, was to remove Gary Lineker, who had announced his impending international retirement after the tournament's conclusion, but who was still seeking one more goal to bring him level with Bobby Charlton at the top of the all-time England goal-scoring charts, which of course he would never get, and replace him with Alan Smith. Yes, the co-commentator who is eulogised so frequently by Martin Tyler for his heading accuracy was brought on to rescue the situation, and suffice it to say, it didn't work. Sweden killed the game in the 82nd minute, as Brolin played 1-2s with both Klas Ingersson and Martin Dahlin before chipping the keeper. England suffered their second consecutive Euros group stage exit, and in fact, up until 2012, England either didn't qualify or make it past the group stages once there in all but 3 tournaments. 1968, when there were only 4 teams in it, 1996, where they were the hosts and reached the semi-finals, and 2004, when they unluckily lost to Portugal in the quarter-finals. Let's hope Euro 2021 doesn't see England revert to type. That just about concludes today's video on the 10 most embarrassing or humiliating, whatever word you want to call it, England defeats of all time. Let me know if I missed any in the comments below, but if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.